Hey guys, we're going to finish up our notes on the civil rights movement. We have 2 slides. There's going to be a short video in here as well of Malcolm X. So here we go. Let's go ahead and get started. So things are going to start getting worse in the civil rights movement in terms of people being assassinated, in terms of people being beaten, treated very badly because of their fight for equality. And a lot of that is going to be sparked by the 24th Amendment. So the 24th Amendment to the Constitution is ratified, which means it's approved and added in January of 1964, and this abolishes poll taxes. So it says that you can't charge people money to vote, and a lot of Black Southerners had been prevented from voting because of poll taxes, even if the poll tax was not very much, because of things like sharecropping and the constant cycle of poverty that a lot of people were in. They had no money, no extra money to spend, and so they weren't able to vote. So the 24th Amendment abolishes poll taxes. In that same year, the civil rights workers, especially from SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and other groups, CORE as well is another group that was involved, they start what's called the Freedom Summer. And that summer is when black and white civil rights workers went into Mississippi and tried to register blacks to vote. The poll tax has basically said, you know, it's free to vote, so they're starting to try to register people to vote. In late June of 1964, 3 of those civil rights workers are killed. 2 are from New York and 1 is from Mississippi. So these are Andrew Goodman, who is a Jewish student from New York, James Chaney, who was a black man from Mississippi, and Michael Schwerner, who was also a Jewish worker from New York. And you can see the missing poster here showing that they haven't been seen and asking people to contact the FBI. They were beaten to death. Their bodies were eventually found in a man-made earthen dam in Mississippi. The FBI comes in. They end up arresting 21 white Mississippians, including the local sheriff, but they're in front of all-white juries, and those all-white juries in Mississippi acquit all of them. So we're going to talk more about these deaths next time, and I'll show you some videos, and we'll look at some pictures from John Lewis's graphic novel March. We'll look at book 3 because it has some really interesting pictures and information about them. That same year, the next year, in March of 1965, Martin Luther King Jr., John Lewis, other civil rights workers are going to resume the voter registration campaign. They're going to move into Selma, Alabama. They're going to try to march from Selma to Montgomery. And when they get across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which you can see in the background of this picture, they are attacked by state troopers. Now, MLK is not with them on this first attempt, but on this attempt, they're attacked. They are sprayed with tear gas. They are beaten. They're afraid that they're going to be thrown into the river. 2 people end up being killed in this attack. Now, remember, these are state troopers who were attacking them, people who were supposed to be keeping the peace, and this was a peaceful march. They just wanted to walk. A Boston minister is killed, and a white Detroit woman were killed, so both Northerners. Remember, TV is showing all of this, and so the North is seeing all of this, and the tide is starting to turn against the South because of it. President Johnson, Kennedy was assassinated in '63. President Johnson is president in 1965. He is able to get the Voting Rights Act passed through Congress. This outlawed literacy tests. It outlawed any barrier, basically, to voting. And so This is going to start, I didn't mean to go to that next one, but that's okay. This is going to start giving power to blacks as whites have to cater to their vote. They've got to change their positions because they need the votes of African Americans. And in the 1970s, for the first time since emancipation, blacks are going to start coming back into the South. And a lot of that has to do with these Voting Rights Acts and the Civil Rights Act and the Fair Housing Act, which are all going to be passed in the 60s to start to give blacks more equality, at least under the law. Now, that doesn't mean things are perfect, and we know things are still not perfect today, but you're going to see them start to think about coming back. Violence is going to erupt in Watts in August of 1965. There are going to be allegations of police brutality on a black man. His name is Marquette Fry, and there are going to be 6 days of riots, burning and looting in this predominantly black LA suburb. You're not just seeing this in the South. It's going all the way into Los Angeles. In that riot, 34 people end up being killed, and over $40 million of damage is done. Same time period, Malcolm X starts to bring his idea of what civil rights, what this fight for civil rights should look like as a counter to Martin Luther King Jr. He is inspired by militant black nationalists in a group called the Nation of Islam. He preached black separation by any means necessary. He really wants blacks to fight with any means necessary. It's not the nonviolence that we've seen out of the Martin Luther King Jr.'s civil rights movement. Malcolm X is going to make a pilgrimage to Mecca, and it's going to soften his views, especially on violence. He's going to see Islam in a different way. He's going to separate from the Nation of Islam founder Elijah Muhammad, who, excuse me, who had really encouraged this violent way of fighting for civil rights. Malcolm X was also close friends with Muhammad Ali, and saw a lot of his fights. He's going to speak in favor of Ali. We're going to watch an interview that was done, and the part that we're going to watch right now is Malcolm X is being interviewed, but Ali had also been interviewed at the same time, and they're at the UN. They're trying to fight for equality for black people around the world. But let's watch it, and then I'll talk about it when it's over. Okay, so here's the video about Malcolm X, and we'll talk about some of the things that he says after it's over.
Malcolm X, I want to talk with you briefly about your affiliation with Cassius. How long have you known him?
About 3 years.
And have you been advising him as far as his religious affiliations are concerned?
Well, no, I don't give advice to anyone. He's my brother and my friend. I express what I know and understand around him, but he has a mind of his own and understanding of his own.
Did he feel that, he tells me that he felt that his affiliation with the Muslim religion had a great deal to do with his winning?
Yes, as a follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in the religion of Islam, it definitely had everything to do with his victory. It gave him the confidence that was necessary to be the winner.
Malcolm X, you were involved in a controversy some months ago with your leader. Is that over?
Well, I've been silent for the past 90 days because of some statements I made concerning the President of the United States, which were distorted.
They were distorted?
And yes.
What did you say, Malcolm?
Well, I said the same thing that everybody says, that his assassination was the result of the climate of hate. But only I said the chickens came home to roost, and which means the same thing. Climate of hate means that this is the result of something. And when I said chickens coming home to roost, I said the same thing.
But you did not say that you were glad the president was killed.
No, that's what the press said. What would I look like saying that I'm glad the president was killed?
Malcolm, this was your first public statement in that 90-day period, is it not?
First time I opened up my mouth in 90 days. That's why I'm talking so fast and so hearty.
You feel, however, that we're making progress in this country and worldwide?
No. I will never say that progress is being made. If you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches, there's no progress. You pull it all the way out, that's not progress. The progress is healing the wound that the blow made. And they haven't even begun to pull a knife out, much less try and heal the wound. They won't even admit the knife is there.
You have
Okay, so several things that I want to point out in here. Notice that the guy doing the interview and Malcolm X both refer to Ali as Cassius, by his original given name, Cassius Clay. Also, Malcolm X is giving credit to Islam and the Nation of Islam, its leader Elijah Muhammad, for helping Ali in his fight. But at the same time, you see him kind of distancing himself because of his comments about President Kennedy's assassination and saying that it's the chickens coming home to roost. Malcolm X got a lot of criticism for saying that, and he's trying to kind of defend his comments in this. You also see him saying that progress is not happening in the civil rights movement, that what needs to happen is healing, and that hasn't happened. That's a theme that we still hear today in the Black Lives Matter movement and other protests against racial discrimination that still exists in this country. A lot of people are critical of people for not trying to heal the wounds that have been in place for hundreds of years, starting with slavery and moving through the civil rights movement into today. So you see some of those same themes in what Malcolm X is saying. So a lot to think about from that short interview clip. Let's continue talking about the Black Power movement. So MLK is assassinated on April 4th, 1968 by James Earl Ray in Memphis, Tennessee. He was there to participate in a public workers strike and was assassinated right outside his hotel room. You can see people with him pointing to where the shot came from. James Earl Ray was the person who assassinated him. 68 is not a great year for the United States. We'll talk more about that as we go on with this unit in the 60s. But that's one major event that kind of continues to divide the country in this time period. The Black Panther Party is founded in Oakland, California. They proclaim that white urban police officers are their enemy. It's founded by Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, and they promoted violence in the quest for separation of blacks. Over 4 years, from 1967 to 1970, 9 policemen and 10 Black Panthers are killed because of violence. Bobby Seale is arrested in 1968 at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. There was lots of rioting at that convention, which we'll talk about later. But he was protesting. He is arrested with 7 others, and he's tried for conspiracy to incite riots because of their violent kind of outlook. So you see things shifting from the nonviolence of MLK into a more violent protest. We're going to see the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City. Tommy Smith and John Carlos, who were 2 track stars in the U.S., they won the silver and gold medals at the Olympics. And when the national anthem played, they gave the Black Power salute. This was super controversial. The U.S. Olympic Committee barred them from Olympic competition for the rest of their lives. They were told that they were unpatriotic. There's a lot of similarity between how they were treated and how we see NFL athletes who are kneeling during the anthem have been treated or criticized for what they're doing as a form of protest. We're going to talk about the white guy who was on the podium with them, an Australian, next class, because his story is very interesting as well. Stokely Carmichael, who had been a leader of SNCC, he gets arrested 27 times in his time at SNCC. And he starts to wonder if this nonviolence is working, because all that seems to happen is that people are getting arrested. So he separates and begins a Black Power movement with the basic message of, it is a call for Black people in this country to unite, to recognize their heritage, to build a sense of community. It is a call for Black people to define their own goals, to lead their own organizations. So you see this movement, they make a lot of headway. They have Voting Rights Act, we have a new Civil Rights Act, we have a Fair Housing Act, but you're seeing people start to think that maybe nonviolence isn't working quite so well. So these are all issues that are really going to be at the forefront of what we're talking about in the 1960s. There's going to be other protest movements. Vietnam is going to be happening at this time period as well. So this kind of culminates in a larger protest movement in American culture in this time period. So, which we will continue talking about as we go through this unit. So that concludes this lecture. Make sure you've taken notes. If you need to go back and watch something again. Take notes. We'll have a quiz next class. I will see you then.